Hi members, welcome to the latest video lesson, this time on the theme of good and evil in Jekyll and Hyde. A couple of background points to bear in mind. Good and evil is closely linked with the duality of human nature, which is a key theme, also another key theme in the novella. And as with many works of literature at the time that deal with good and evil has far more prominence throughout this story. Okay, so we have to ask ourselves why that might be and what message Stevenson's trying to convey in doing so. Right, okay, quickly moving on. So why is good and evil important as a theme? Okay, there is a stark contrast between the charitable works of Jekyll and the murder and destruction of Hyde. Seeing as Jekyll and Hyde are two parts of the same person, is Stevenson suggesting that it is impossible to separate the two? Remember, Jekyll's assertion that he believed that inside all of us there is good and there is bad. Which aspect of our character is more dominant? Well, civilization has ensured that we have a moral code. We understand the difference between right and wrong, and we can usually talk ourselves out of committing any crimes and so on. Do you have to consider what is good only in relation to what is considered bad? For example, Jekyll did charitable work, but he also spawned the birth of Hyde, who was pure evil. So what's the relationship between there? Was his charitable work a guilty conscience, or was he actually a good person in doing that? What drove that? Remember, it's not the potion that makes Jekyll or Hyde evil, but rather it is his reaction to the potion that is evil. So in Jekyll's case, it was the devil in him that was stronger than the angel, and therefore Hyde took pleasure in committing criminal deeds. He didn't have to all of a sudden go and commit horrific crime after horrific crime. He just felt that's what he wanted to do. Jekyll stated that he believed we all have good and evil inside us. It is through thousands of years of civilization that we have learned to control our evil impulses, adopting a moral code upon which our societies have been based. It was within the very rigid and repressed Victorian society that Jekyll struggled to control his own hidden impulses, and so set about releasing his alter ego Hyde, who was pure evil, linked to the theme of duality, as I said. Also, you have to reference Darwin's theory of evolution, how we've descended from animals, the various transformations we've evolved through. Caveman, remember Hyde is referred to as troglodytic, his ape-like fury, clubbing, all references to a less developed, less civilized aspect of each of us. Areas to look at when considering the theme of good and evil. Characters: Jekyll and Hyde, obviously. Possibly Utterson. Remember, Utterson was envious of the down-going men that he used to professionally work with as a lawyer and defend. He was envious of their ability to act on impulse and not care about consequences. He couldn't do that in the setting of Victorian society, remember. Victorian London and its repression, poverty, deserted streets and fog all helped Stevenson explore the theme of good and evil. Remember, it was Jekyll having to repress his impulses that prompted him to create Hyde. Poverty, lots of poverty as a result of the Industrial Revolution and the mass transit of people from the countryside to the cities, and then the inability of the cities to cope with this influx of people. So there were vast swathes of areas of London which were deeply impoverished. We've got descriptions of deserted streets where even Enfield longed for the sight of a policeman, or Utterson longed for the sight of a policeman. And of course the fog, you can't see clearly in fog, you can't see what's lurking in the shadows, allowed Stevenson to explore character and explore the theme of good and evil. Stevenson exploring human nature and its makeup, I just said that. Hyde's evil behaviour, Jekyll's attempts at being good, why, and the Gothic setting throughout. Lots of elements from Gothic literature appear in Jekyll and Hyde. Nighttime, unnatural occurrences, so the supernatural, personifying the moon, the fog, um, deserted streets, and so on. Okay, so as ever, some quotations to connect and link to this theme. Jekyll had an approved tolerance of others. So that's Utterson presenting his good friend as a good person. One of your fellows who do what they call good. So a description of Jekyll, again presenting him in a positive light, links the theme of duality. Actually, sorry, that first quote, an approved tolerance of others, that was in reference to Utterson himself, where he would never judge a character he was faced with. He'd treat his clients, his criminal clients, with the respect that he would treat anybody. In chapter 2, then, the ghost of some old sin. Now, this is Utterson trying to explain what hold Hyde must have over Jekyll. He's convinced that Hyde is blackmailing Jekyll in some way. But this also implies that Jekyll may be known for some past indiscretions. So he may have been known amongst his circle, within his circle of friends, as having, acted immorally previously, because men of a certain status in Victorian London had very strict expectations placed upon them and their behaviour. And again, just expanding on that point, Utterson he's saying that Jekyll must have secrets of his own, black secrets by the look of him, secrets compared to which poor Jekyll's worst would be like sunshine. I said he's comparing Jekyll and Hyde here, ironically, as they are the same person. And he's saying that Hyde, just based on how he looks, must have some horrific secrets that if Utterson can find out, he can then use against Hyde and protect his friend Jekyll, and maybe allow Jekyll to break free from whatever hold Hyde has over him. Of course, remember, Utterson takes the reader on the journey through the novel. As Utterson finds pieces of the jigsaw, so do we. And because Utterson's a lawyer, we trust his judgment. So at this point in chapter 2, we're thinking, yes, Hyde is evil and must have some hold over Jekyll because Jekyll is good, and them two would never ordinarily know each other, be connected to each other at all. An innocent and old world kindness. This is the maid's description of Carew. Remember, so Carew, Sir Danvers Carew, upper class, politician, respectable, innocent, good. And what happened to him? With ape-like fury, Hyde clubs him to death. So the clash of good and evil coming together in one terrible event. Good and evil. We're talking about Hyde's housekeeper now, also linked to the theme of duality. She had an evil face, smoothed by hypocrisy, but her manners were excellent. Each of us inside us have good and bad. So in chapter 10, when the whole story is revealed to us through Jekyll's own words in his kind of confession, his letter that Utterson finds after his suicide, I was radically both. So he was both good and evil. Although the evil part of him, so when he created Hyde, Hyde was 100% evil. Was Jekyll 100% good at that point? Up to you. Describing how he felt as Hyde, I felt younger, lighter, happier, tenfold more wicked. So Jekyll describing how it felt to be solely Hyde contrasts greatly with Hyde's behaviour, which is brutal and violent. He wouldn't younger, lighter, happier, and yet he's younger, lighter, happier, committing murder and God knows what else. It was neither diabolical nor divine. Diabolical, evil, divine, godly. Jekyll revealing that it wasn't the potion that determined good or evil, but the individual's true spirit. It was his reaction to the potion that was evil, not the potion itself, implying that Jekyll is evil, because it was his response to the potion that was evil, not the potion itself. His internal conflict. Between these two, I felt I now had to choose. His impulses, his desires that had been repressed for so long in Victorian society. My evil finally destroyed the balance of my soul, and yet I was not alarmed. The fall seemed natural. So Jekyll expanding on what it was like to have good and evil fighting side by side for control, implying that once you release or give in to the evil lurking inside you, you won't look back. More to the point now, you'll struggle to control it, as Jekyll found out to his ultimate cost. He was horrified when he realised that he could no longer control when he transformed from Jekyll into Hyde. He was on a park bench, remember, and he suddenly looked down and he didn't recognise his hand. His hand was hairier and shorter than he thought it should be. And then the realisation dawned on him, and he had to sprint to his house before the transformation was complete. And from that point forward, he couldn't go out because he couldn't trust he wouldn't change into Hyde. So once he'd given the evil part of him this voice, this oxygen, he struggled to control it. To summarise then, Jekyll and Hyde is a story about the battle inside us all between good and evil. The question is, which one is bigger? The fact Hyde takes control suggests that unless reined in and ignored, our primitive evil nature, and that's links to Darwin, will be dominant. However, the fact that Hyde ends up dead does point to an inherent weakness or failure in being evil, or allowing evil to take control. So there's a warning there from Stevenson. Yes, you might do well to ignore your evil impulses, because if you give in to them, they may take over, they may control you, but ultimately it won't end good for you. So there's a warning there. I remember in a Victorian society that was quite religious and they believed in heaven and hell and sins must be punished. That's quite a stark warning. Jekyll's struggle implies that both good and evil are intertwined, that it is not possible to have one without the other. Okay, exam relevance. Obviously, if a question comes up directly on Dr. Jekyll as good or Hyde as evil, then you've got plenty to talk about. You could also tie it in with any question on Utterson, theme of duality. It's got close links with context of Victorian society, like repression, expectation, status, and so on. Obviously, the creation of tension and/or mystery. When does evil lurk? Late at night, deserted streets. When there's fog or storms. And what was the message Stevenson was trying to convey with his exploration of the theme of good and evil? Okay, so there's plenty there for you to focus on, and best of luck with that. All right, cheers guys, see you later, bye.